So I'm pretty sure the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes are the most inevitable games ever that haven't been officially confirmed or mentioned in any way. We all know that they're going to happen eventually, and I would even bet as soon as next year if I'm being honest, so in the spirit of that, I thought today that I'd discuss 5 exciting things that are definitely happening in the remakes. I mean, I guess I can't technically say definitely because the game doesn't technically officially exist yet, but if the game is happening, and we know that it is happening, then these things are coming right along with it, and they are extremely exciting. Before we get to it though, I would like to shout out my Pokemon podcast really quick over on the UCast Studios YouTube channel. I talk about fun Pokemon topics there every Friday, and I've even started having other Poketubers on as guests, like Birdkeeper Toby, so check it out if you'd like to support the channel, and with that, on to the video. So the first and most obvious thing that we can expect from the Diamond and Pearl remakes is the Dynamax and Gigantamax phenomenon. As the marquee feature of the generation, it can only be expected to feature in all the main series games of the generation, similar to how Mega Evolution translated into ORAS in Gen 6. And since a Gen 8 release seems extremely likely for the remakes, it only makes sense for Dynamaxing to be included. However, it seems that with the release of the Sword and Shield expansion, that its inclusion seems even more likely. There was an item introduced in the Isle of Armor called Max Honey that can help give Pokemon the ability to Gigantamax, and given Honey's introduction in the Gen 4 games, it seems that this might be the way that it's implemented in the remakes. Fellow Poketuber Birdkeeper Toby, who I just mentioned, even brought up the idea in one of his videos that Sinnoh's honey trees could act as max raid dens in the Sinnoh region, similar to that encounter with Vespiquen in the Isle of Armor. That part of it is just a theory, but all of it comes together to paint a pretty irrefutable picture that we are going to see Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing in the Sinnoh remakes, that very likely will involve the Max Honey as well. How that will play into Gen 4's story is yet to be seen, but I think we can pretty much trust that it will be there when the time comes. Another thing I definitely believe we can expect to see in the Sinnoh remakes is the Battle Frontier. The Battle Frontier was famously missing from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire to the dismay of many, but the second time around in the Diamond and Pearl remakes, I believe it'll be included. This is because the disappointment of its exclusion in ORAS was pretty well spoken, and it was in direct contrast to the reasoning for its exclusion, which essentially amounted to that they didn't think people would want to spend time on it. Since that clearly was shown to be not the case, I believe that feedback will be put into practice for the Diamond and Pearl remakes, and we will see the Battle Frontier this time around. It really doesn't seem likely that Game Freak would make that same mistake twice, and I'm pretty sure they know how hotly anticipated these games are, so all things considered, I imagine that we will see the return of this fan favorite feature once the games are finally revealed. When the thought of Diamond and Pearl remakes cross people's minds, one thing that can easily get glossed over is the idea of new characters. It is a remake of an old game after all, but there will almost assuredly be new characters in these games that weren't in the originals. We can say this because in every remake so far, even in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, if you count Green, new characters have been added to those games that weren't in the original titles. This is extremely exciting because, well, duh, they're new characters, and new characters are always exciting, but the prospect of new characters in an old game is arguably even more exciting. The potential of how these characters could fit into an already established story is fascinating, especially because it could also be a sign of new, completely original content that is made just for the remakes, similar to Zinnia and the Delta episode from ORAS. Whatever way you slice it, the inclusion of new characters is going to do a lot for these remakes, and the fact that it can more or less be expected, given what we know about how remakes operate, just adds to the hype for these titles. One feature that is theoretical, but couldn't fit in better if it tried, is the Great Marsh being converted into a wild area. The Great Marsh is Sinnoh's Safari Zone, and Safari Zones, as they come, are essentially wild areas before wild areas were wild areas. And since the wild area as a mechanic is another marquee feature of Gen 8, it only makes sense for it to carry over just like the Dynamaxing from earlier. It can't exactly be designed into the region itself though, though, since the structure of Sinnoh has already been established, but the idea fits perfectly as sort of a replacement for the Great Marsh. Game Freak has shied away from safari zones in recent years, so since it's an idea that they haven't really been keeping up on anyway, replacing the Great Marsh with a wild area, or simply turning it into a wild area, makes all the sense in the world from just about every angle imaginable. It would be a nice way to preserve the feel of what was in the original game, while improving it at the same time, and Gen 8ifying it all at the same time, as we know would be customary as long as these games do actually release in this generation. It's just too much of a perfect fit, so I fully expect it to be a thing when the remakes drop. One of the most exciting things about the concept of Diamond and Pearl remakes is the additional storylines that they could potentially add into what was already there with the original games. There are literally infinite possibilities in this category, but two plot lines I think we can expect that are especially fascinating are additional story details for both Regigigas and Arceus. On the Regigigas side, it only makes sense as we are getting 2 additional Regis in the Crown Tundra expansion, which obviously would factor into and change the plotline for Regigigas in the Sinnoh games a little bit, and I think that's exactly what Game Freak has in mind. Regigigas didn't have a huge bearing on the story of the Sinnoh region, but it did have an event sequence dedicated to it, and with more Regis to consider, we can only expect that that event will have more to it as well. Arceus, meanwhile, will obviously have some bearing on the plot at large. First, I do expect it to feature in an additional plotline for the Sinnoh remakes because 1, it had a cut event in the originals that would only make sense to revive in the remakes. 2, now that Arceus is a known Pokemon and has been for a while and is super important to the Sinnoh region's lore, I believe that that would justify it appearing in the main game instead of being reserved for a special event. In fact, we saw the same exact thing happen with Deoxys in the Delta episode from Oraz, and I believe an equivalent sort of situation will happen with Arceus. And considering it's God we're talking about here, who created Sinnoh and the rest of the Pokemon world, a plotline involving Arceus can only mean some big, meaty, juicy details. And not only does that make me excited, but the fact that I believe it's so likely to occur has me incredibly hyped as well. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and a comment, and subscribe if you're new for more Pokemon content. If you'd like to support the channel and further help me make videos like this, consider checking out my Pokemon remixes on Spotify and watching my Pokemon Cardinal series if you haven't yet, which, by the way, 2 new episodes of Cardinal will be premiering this week on Thursday and Saturday, so be sure to stay tuned for that. With that said, I will see you then, I love you all, and I will smell you guys later.